Reverb, let's go. Okay, so we have a question. We have a question for this week's Ask the Producer, and it is from Bryn Johnson 423. Thank you for taking the time to do these videos. Can you do a vid on how to use reverb in your music? I use my ear, but would like to know more about the different types of reverbs and how to use them. Thank you so much for your hard work. Blessings, Bryn. Bryn, thank you for the question, and we are answering that today. So let's go. So I prepared here. This is the Jolt demo that all of you have access to. You can check it out in the studio. However, I have now added a Lush Vox lead here just to, I'm specifically going for vocals now, but I will show you a couple of other ones as well. Now for vocals, here we go. Adding a reverb to the track. So this is what it sounds like dry.
I'll follow you wherever you go.
Now, adding the reverb, here we have a bunch of different types of reverb. So really what all of these does is kind of just change the tone a little bit. Now, this is more up to your personal preferences and taste. I have a tendency to like plates on vocals. Plates are really good because they're really lush and they kind of have a very smooth sort of, I don't know how to say it, but they sound a lot smoother. We can go through all of them so we can check it out. You can also do this in your own DAW to make sure that you have the proper quality when it comes to your headphones, etc., so you can listen through there. But let's go through them all. Medium room, what it really does, and you know, the thing is, we can put this into perspective. So let's listen to it first. Let's listen to the medium room.
I'll follow you wherever you go.
So the vibe this is really giving is that it is, well, a medium room. So you're in a room. This is kind of just setting the space that you want for this track. So if you want something to sound a little bit like bedroom pop, lo-fi, a little bit like that, medium rooms are really great to kind of give that sense. Medium rooms are also great for drums specifically because you want to be able to kind of mimic that garage feeling of drums, for example. Then you use a medium room. Now, that goes for all of these room and hallway ones. They are all trying to emulate real spaces in the real world. So if we go to church, for example, church, it's giving a bigger feeling generally when you listen to it. So let's go with that one.
I'll follow you.
You can also hear that the tail is a lot longer, but there is a little bit more like clarity to it. It's a lot more airy. It doesn't feel as kind of like close and condensed. It's very, very large in the space. Close room and wide room is giving a lot of the similar vibes of medium. It's just close would be like the smallest type of room. Wide room would be bigger. So let's go over close.
Wherever you go.
Here, it's very short tail. Wide room, longer tail, still giving the same type of vibe. It's not as large as church, but it's pretty close. Now hallway, giving a little bit more, like the tail is a little bit longer, but it has a different kind of sound to it.
Stay close to you.
It has a lot more of that kind of like boomy feeling to it. It's a little bit like, it's giving a lot more body to it. To a certain extent, maybe a little bit too much, but you can circumvent that using the low cut and high cut. And we're going to go through those later. Now with the plates. Plates are emulating a old school physical object. So plates back in the day used to be these big boxes that had a metal plate in them. And there would be a speaker connected to one side of the plate, and on the other side of the plate there would be a type of pickup or mic that would listen on the other end of it. So if you imagine how a metal plate would vibrate and resonate together with something like that, it is picking up it afterwards and then sending it back to your mix. So what a plate sounds like, I love the rich plate that we have.
'Cause darling, you're my home.
You can kind of sense it going through this sheet of metal, sort of, because you hear the nice kind of airiness coming through really well. Now, finally, we have spring reverbs, and they are generally, in the past, they have been used for a lot of guitars, because a lot of guitar amplifiers have them. So, same concept as with the plate. You would have a speaker on one end of a spring, and then a microphone on the other end. And then those would then generate a reverb because they would resonate with the music. So if we listen to a big spring, they're a little bit more metallic. They sound a little bit harsher to an extent, but they have a certain tone to them that is like very old school and guitar-esque. So if you're doing anything like bedroom pop, if you're doing anything lo-fi, if you're doing anything specifically guitar, it's very accurate to use one of these. Now, I'm going to continue with the vocals specifically, going into rich plate, and here I will set the dials. So with the big knob that you see for your reverb, you can change the length of that reverb, so the tail sort of. So
I'll follow
still very long, but here it kind of takes over. There's a lot of it here now.
you.
So this is basically that. Now mix controls how much of the dry signal versus the wet signal you want. So here, completely dry.
Wherever you go.
Now it's completely wet.
Stay close to you.
There's a lot of that high end that has kind of disappeared, so it makes it feel like somebody is standing further away from you. And this is a very great way of creating depth in your mixes as well. We can use the mix knob to push things further back in the mix when it comes to all of your tracks. Now, if I were to add this to any given source, one thing to note is that reverb has a tendency to add a lot of frequency to your sound, right? So if I'm listening to this now, giving the mix, like let's set it at 50.
You, 'cause darling, you're my home.
And if I listen without,
I'll follow you.
so this vocal is already like pretty well mixed, but with the reverb, it gets a little bit muddy.
Wherever you go.
Because it is representing all of the frequencies throughout your vocals, right? So what I wanted to do here, and I'm going to do this very apparently first with the mix to max. So now I'm only listening to the process vocals. Taking out some of that low end will make sure that your vocals won't sound too muddy. Also, another thing is cutting out a little bit of that high end. 12K somewhere around is good enough, but like, let's listen to it as we're playing. You know, her voice is very, very airy, so I wanted to take out a little bit of that. So now I'm setting that to 8K. And this is around 400. You don't have to be as harsh with this. This is just my preference. But now listening to it with the dry signal as well.
Stay close to you.
Very light reverb. You can hear that it's there. It's creating a lot of that space, but it's not taking a lot of space in the frequency spectrum. So if we listen to this in the context of a song,
I'll follow you wherever you go.
Versus
Stay close to you.
it's barely audible at this point, but it is giving a little bit of that space and kind of letting the entire vocals kind of meld together with the mix. If you want more of that sense of like having a very like spacious vocal there, just up the mix or up this big knob.
'Cause darling, you're my home. I'll follow you
Versus.
wherever you go.
So allowing all of these frequencies kind of like melding together with the reverb allows your vocals to sit better in the mix. If you just leave it dry, it won't interact with the other tracks as well unless you have the reverb on. Especially if you have an ethereal beat that I have here that has a lot of reverb and stuff like that, you want it to kind of live in the same space. Now, we are going to go into drums. So let's say you wanted to add something of a reverb on here. Now, this is a very, very like intense drum beat, right? So let's say we would have what I recommended, a medium room on here. If you want to make this like a little bit of that garagey vibe. Versus it off, on. So here you can also hear it being like very overbearing in the low end. So just cutting out a little bit of that, like 180. Or even more, you're still getting the sense of it being in that medium room, but it doesn't take over the mix. So you need to make space for everything else, right? Now, the same thing goes for the high cut. You can cut a little bit of that down. Still getting the same vibe. If we wanted to put it on like a plate or something like that, giving it a different context. Versus it off. On. Same thing goes with drums. It goes with anything really. You just want to make sure that you don't make it too overbearing. You don't want to make the track take over the entire mix. So that is how you use reverb. With that said, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And don't forget to ask your questions down below.